Welcome to the session. Today let's discuss about the parameters and return types of a function. So depending on the parameters and return types, there are different categories of functions in C. We'll see about all those categories in today's video. So let's get into the video now. So there are 5 categories of functions. So coming to the first category, all these categories depends upon the parameters and their return types. So coming to here, functions, the first category is functions with no arguments and no return values, which means a function declaration contains no arguments and the return type is void. So this is the first category, and the second category is function with arguments and no return values. Function with arguments, which means we need to pass the values from the main function, but we are not going to return any value back to the main function. And the fourth category and the third category is function with arguments and return values. So here we need to pass the arguments as well as the main function is expecting some return value back to the main function. Coming to the functions with no arguments and but return values, we are not going to pass any arguments from the main function, but it is expecting some return value from the called function. Now, the fifth category is functions returning multiple values. So this is the concept which we learn in the pointers concept, but then these are the 5 categories of functions in C. We'll see one by one in detail about all the categories here. Functions with no arguments and no return values. When a function has no arguments, it does not receive any data from calling function, which means we are not giving any input values to the call function. When a function does not return a value, the calling function does not receive any data from the call function. Functions that don't return a value are known as void functions. That is, there is no data transfer between the calling function and the call function. So we'll see an example now. So this is the declaration. When there is no return value, then the return type will be void. And if there are no parameters, so add is the function name with no parameters or with an empty parenthesis. So here every part of the implementation, the reading part and the printing part now for this category will be within the function definition itself. Now coming to the next category of functions, functions with arguments and no return values. When a function has arguments, then data is transferred from calling function to call function. The call function receives data from calling function and does not send back any values to calling function because there is no return value, which means the function definition won't return any value back to the main function because it doesn't have any written value. This is the example. If you just see the declaration itself, you can understand what under which category it falls. So this is a category, second category uh, where there is no return value, but we are passing some arguments from the main function to the call function. So here void is the return type and add is the function name and addition of two numbers. So we are going to pass two parameters from the main function to the call function. So hence the input is passed from the calling function to the call function, but no return value is the main function is not getting any output value, which means no value is should be expected from the by the main function. Now the third category is functions with arguments and return values. So both data transfer is there, which means both input and output functions are there. In this data is transferred between calling and call functions. That means called function receives data from calling function, and called function also sends the return value to the calling function. Now we'll see the example here. So this is an example for adding of two numbers or addition of two numbers. So we are the main function. There is a return type which is the default return type, which is an integer, which means the function definition, the main function is expecting an integer value from the call function. So there are two parameters. So it is a category where there is a parameters and also return type. Now the fourth category is functions with no arguments and return values. So there is no arguments, as well as we are not going to return any value, but return value. So when function has no arguments, data cannot be transferred to call function blindly to say there is no input function. But the call function can send some return value to the calling function. So we'll see an example. So the return type is int. So the main function is expecting some input value from the call function, but it's not passing any input value. Hence, the reading part will be within the function definition itself. So these are the different categories of functions. So how using any of these categories we should make or we should solve the given application. So these are the different categories of functions. So the last category, which is function which returns multiple values. So till now we didn't return any multiple values. Only one value is being returned from the call function to the calling function. So whenever you wanted to return multiple values, we have to pass the addresses of those variables. So we'll see how a function returns multiple values with the concept of pointers in the coming videos. Hope you understood all the four categories which we have learned with the help of different examples. So we'll see in the next video. So thank you. Let's end up the session today.